What is up, guys? How's it going? Happy Friday. Hope you guys are all doing well. Everything going good and all that fun shit. So, it's Friday night, having a good time. Got me some Voodoo Ranger IPA today. I like this a lot. Cheers. All right, so tonight what I'm going to do is something, I don't know how long this is going to take. It might be a little bit long, we'll find out. Last week I was watching Mark over at Twanger's Turntable, and he did something he called Thread or Not, because he got an idea from Kevin over at Back in the Groove. So basically what Kevin did at Back in the Groove was show 12 albums that kind of showed his taste in his music buying or whatever, like what influenced him style-wise or whatever. And then Mark saw that and he decided to go at it kind of a different way, this same idea. And Mark went from like music he was influenced by as a kid before he was 12 years old, and then stuff at 12 years old on that he was buying during a certain time to kind of show why he buys the music that he buys. So I thought this was a really cool idea. Although Mark's idea was a little like expanding on Keith's idea, but overall, I'll put links to both of those down below. So when Mark was talking, he had older siblings and all that. My story is a little different. I am the oldest of my generation. I'm the oldest of the cousins. I'm the oldest. I have a little brother. That said, I didn't have older siblings to really influence me. My parents weren't huge into music, so I do have some of that though. So I'm just going to kind of go ahead and get started. I've got a pretty good stack of records to show. I'm not going to go by year or anything like that. This is just to show the types of influences I had early that kind of lead to the type of music I listen to now, and so on. So we're going to find out. So first, as a child growing up, like I said, my parents weren't really huge into music, but my mom, who was born in 48, of course, liked the Beatles. I pulled this out because this is the style of the Beatles. She wasn't into the Sgt. Peppers and the more esoteric. She was more into the I Want to Hold Your Hand, She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah. So I heard the Beatles a lot when I was growing up. Some of this, let's see, like bands like the Byrds, and the Animals, stuff like that. That's what I grew up. This is this kind of stuff that my mom was listening to when she was younger that kind of brought it into that type of thing. And my dad, he was a huge fan of like surf music and stuff. Jan and Dean, the Beach Boys, Surfer Joe and the Safaris, stuff like that. So I heard a lot of this as a child also. One of the other things my parents did, it was a lot of just top 40 type radio or whatever. You got to think I was born in '69, so I'm talking about the late 70s, the mid to late 70s, the kind of stuff that we heard around the house and the stuff that was in the car. You know, people like Juice Newton, who was very popular at the time. So I remember hearing a lot of this, and this is one of the reasons I bought this record is because of those types of things. Same with all the other ones I've shown. The reason I own those is because of those types of things. This was huge when I was a kid. The Gambler by Kenny Rogers. I've heard this album a bunch of times. This was given to me by a friend at work. I know everything on here, you know, all the songs, The Gambler and She Believes in Me, Sleep Tonight, Good Man, stuff like that. So my parents were listening to this type of stuff that was the popular, you know, Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers and that type of music. And also, it was also the era of disco, Saturday Night Fever. I just picked this up recently, and I picked it up due to that purpose. I've heard this album a whole bunch as a kid. I knew every word on it. I hadn't heard it in forever. I played it right after I bought it, and I know every song on here by heart. It's just ingrained in my memory as a child. So, you know, they listened to that, and, you know, ABBA was being played, and Juice Newton, and, you know, like I said, Dolly Parton, and Kenny Rogers, and John Denver, which I don't own any John Denver. I will never own any John Denver. That was something my parents played all the time. Me and my brother, we hated it so much. It was just, even back then, I knew that wasn't any good. So no John Denver, although I heard a lot of that growing up, like I said. And my dad, you know, he liked to play You know, when they pulled up the records, it was the Beatles and it was Jan and Dean and the Animals and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I had as childhood. Then as I got a little bit older, 5th, 6th grade, somewhere around that time frame or whatever, Top 40 Radio, we got a lot of music from Top 40 Radio. Listened to a lot of this, you know, Hall & Oates. I have memories of childhood of me and my brother singing Private Eyes and stuff, listening to Casey Kasem, you know, and Maneater and those types of songs. So when I saw this, that's why I had to buy this. So, you know, Hall & Oates, let's see, Stevie Nicks was very popular back, you know, Top 40 Radio stuff. So we were hearing a lot of this stuff. I wasn't buying records yet at this point in time. It was mostly what I was hearing on the radio. You know, you got to think grade school, late grade school, getting ready to turn into junior high, Supertramp, stuff like that. And this also starts kind of like you hit junior high and I started meeting new friends in the school. Long story, I went to a private school when I was in grade school, so when I hit junior high, I was suddenly thrust into public education and started meeting new people, new kids in the school and so on, who had older brothers or whatever, so the music was changing, top 40 type stuff. So we were listening to Supertramp, and I had friends who had older brothers, and they listened to Loverboy, and I still love this record. This era of Loverboy is just great music. So that's, you know, junior high type age. So on, the influences are starting to come from friends, older brothers, Styx, of course, Paradise Theater, and multiple other Styx albums, things with, you know, I mean, they were huge, and Journey and all of that type of music was just big, you know. And then I'm about the 7th grade, sometime between 7th and 8th grade. I can't remember exactly when. And I basically kind of got my first of my own music. Yeah, I had a couple of things. I did have, you know, some leftover type stuff. I did, you know, stuff from when I was a kid. I had the Grease soundtrack and stuff like that. But my first, like, what I consider like adult rock music, my parents bought me this for Christmas one year. On cassette at the time, of course. Everything was in cassette, so I've replaced all this with vinyl. So, you know, I got a boombox. I think it had to have been either Christmas or my birthday. And this was a cassette that came with it. So Billy Squier was one I really kind of got into. This album right here was another one of my first purchases as a kid, as a young pre-teen or whatever. So, I mean, this is still my favorite Stones album. This is when I first heard the Stones. This is what they sounded like. Well, not necessarily when I first heard the Stones. My parents were playing the older stuff along with the Beatles and the Stones, and I was hearing the Who and things like that, you know, but not like, my parents weren't like into bands. They weren't like invested in it, honestly. So I knew Stones, of course, been around since before I was alive, but when this came out, you got to think, you know, now I'm in the 7th grade, 7th or 8th grade, this album comes out, music video for Start Me Up and stuff like that. We're seeing that. So I'm getting into that type of music, and I'm listening to like this album by David Bowie. This is my intro to Bowie. I'm assuming at some time in my life I heard Ziggy Stardust and, you know, Suffragette City and stuff like that, but don't really remember. But this is my introduction to Bowie, seeing the videos for Let's Dance and China Girl and stuff like that. And when I say seeing the videos, I mean, you know, we didn't have MTV. We had TBS. When MTV first came out, it wasn't everywhere. It wasn't on every cable channel, and our cable when we lived back in Idaho when I was a kid. So we would have to watch, was it Night Flight, I think is what it was called, on like TBS on like Saturday nights to get our music videos. And sometimes you'd see them if you went to a friend's house and they had the MTV or whatever. Then I meet this kid when I'm in the 8th grade, and he introduces me to Kiss. This is the first Kiss album I ever heard. He was probably a year younger than me, and his parents were probably about my parents' age, but way cooler, you know. and they like listen to Kiss and Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. So I get introduced to Kiss because of Mike. And so that kind of leads me down to a different road from the stuff like Bowie and the Stones and stuff like that. I start with Kiss, and then I get my first Kiss record. That year, after I first started getting into it, we moved to Utah, and as a going away gift, my friend Mike, who introduced me to Kiss, bought me this record. So this is my first Kiss record I ever owned. This is the actual copy I've had since then. I was about 14, or almost 14. I was 13. It was the summer. I was 13 years old. We moved between the 8th and the 9th grade, and this is the first Kiss album I ever owned. And then I'm in Utah. I'm into Kiss and the stuff that's on the radio at the time. And I started like buying my own music. And where we moved to, Utah had MTV. So, it started leading to other things. But Kiss kind of leads to, this was very popular. So Kiss leads to AC/DC. My first bands that I was obsessed with was Kiss, AC/DC, and Iron Maiden. So I'm listening to Kiss, AC/DC, Iron Maiden, almost as a whole. I'm taking my allowance and going down to the record store, buying cassettes for, what were they, $6 back then? And because of Kiss and because of the rock magazines and seeing the videos for like Run to the Hills and stuff like that on MTV, because we actually have MTV, I don't know anybody in town. We moved there in July, and when you move a kid in between the school year, he's not really forced to make friends. It's just whoever's in the neighborhood. And all my neighborhood, most of the kids were younger than mine. My brother had no problem making friends. I did. I spent most of my time watching MTV, listening to music, becoming a sullen teenager. So I'm listening to Maiden. I'm listening to AC/DC. I'm listening to Kiss. Listening to Ozzy Osbourne. This is my first Ozzy Osbourne album I ever owned. And I bought it on cassette at the time, and it was more about, look at this cover. Look, he's spitting chunks of blood. It was so cool. And I listened to this, I'm like, man, this is excellent, excellent stuff. And then school starts, and I'm in the 9th grade, and somebody's telling me, oh, if you like that Ozzy stuff, an older kid, you like that Ozzy stuff, you should listen to Black Sabbath. All those songs on that are Black Sabbath songs. Those aren't Ozzy songs, those are Black Sabbath songs. He used to sing for Black Sabbath. Pre-internet, pre-all that stuff, I had no idea. So I go out and I get a copy of this because it's got all those songs that are on Speak of the Devil, but it's by Black Sabbath. And of course that leads me down the Black Sabbath rabbit hole and the Ozzy rabbit hole. And I've been down the Iron Maiden rabbit hole and the AC/DC rabbit hole. And then that introduces you to the other type of stuff like Judas Priest. And I started going down that rabbit hole, and I was never really a huge Priest fan, but, the videos were on, and we were listening to them, and they were cool and everything else, And then, of course, it's about this is early 80s still, so this is starting to happen. Quiet Riot, I had a copy of this, the videos for Bang Your Head, and all of that come out, and you're doing this. So everybody owned this record. This thing went to number 1, and it started the Sunset Strip revolution, of course, and MTV, watching MTV and so on. When I first saw these guys, Motley Crue, I was hooked right away. I'm in the 9th grade. I see the video for Looks That Kill. Go out, buy the album. It's got the cool pictures on the inside. I'm not taking these out. You've all seen it. They're dark looking and everything else. So I'm kind of really getting into that style of music. The AC/DC and the Ozzy and the Priest and the Maiden have kind of turned that into this darker style of music. And I'm liking bands like Rat. First time I saw the video for Out of the Cellars when I discovered Rat. Saw that on MTV. And I used to have this little book, and I would watch MTV, and I would write down the names of bands I like and the names of their records and stuff, so when I could go to the record store. By this point, when I'm in the 9th grade, I've got a job. My dad ran a restaurant, and he put me to work when I was 14 years old, so now I've got money, not old enough to drive. I can buy whatever music I want. So I'm writing down on this little book, little notebook, names of bands, names of albums. I'm going to the record store and spending all my money on music. I'm buying Rat. I'm buying Def Leppard and Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, Madam Max. It's the 80s. I'm buying, Wasp and, more of this look type of the 80s metal at the time. Of course, there's another part, I'll get to that in a bit, but when it comes to the 80s Sunset Strip style of music, we're listening to Motley Crue and Rat and Twisted Sister and Wasp because of the look. I'm not listening to Poison or Bon Jovi or whatever. Yeah, I know those songs and we're of course aware of those, but that's not what I'm going for because they're not dark enough. I was a broody teenager. I wanted Satan and darkness and evil type stuff. I didn't want songs about girls and things like that. Although Rat is kind of a little bit edgy in between there, kind of ride the line between some of the darker stuff and some of the more, rock and roll night party every day type of music. But I think they were just so good. I think, Warren and Robin, the way they played the guitar, I think they were just so good. And Stephen Pearcy just had that presence. It was something about him. He was just fucking cool. So that's kind of what I'm into at the time. And then there's other stuff that is influencing my style and taste in music that I'm not even realizing at the time, but I'm seeing it all the time. And I'm hearing it, I'm becoming aware of it, but I'm not really paying that much attention. Bands like Berlin and the British new wave style of that same time frame when we were getting the 80s Sunset Strip heavy metal and hard rock. Bands like Berlin, of course, it's MTV, so, this guy's all over the place. Now, Billy Idol was cool, kind of punk looking. His music wasn't really punk, but, just really cool stuff, and he had hot girls in his video and everything else, so it was excellent, But yeah, and then, bands like Duran Duran were being played all the time, seeing the videos for, Hungry Like the Wolf and Rio and all these types of things. All this stuff is influencing me, and I'm not even really realizing it at the time, because at the time, I'm just listening to metal. And bands like The Fix, we're hearing all these songs. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not realizing that it's influencing my musical style. And I realize it now, especially within the last year or so, and I've been buying a whole lot of this music, buying it and realizing how good it is, and that I did kind of miss out on it, that I wasn't really listening to Adamant and The Fix and those types of bands. Of course, there's the Go-Go's. As a dude, you could love the Go-Go's because they were super hot. Oh, their music is okay. It's a little poppy, but man, look how hot they are, especially Jane. Jane was the hot one, in my opinion, of the Go-Go's. And of course, every teenage boy's crush back in the 80s, the Bangles. Are you kidding me? Susanna Hoffs. Man, holy cow. So yeah, bands like the Bangles and, the Eurythmics and Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and all that. All that music is being played, Culture Club and, Madness and all that stuff. It's all influencing my musical style, and I'm not even really realizing it because I'm just basically focused on all that Sunset Strip metal at the time. I'm also focused on something else that happened at that same time. The first time I heard this, I had a friend. All this was underground back then. Metallica was not mainstream. I had a friend, and he knew who they were, and he came over with this cassette and was like, yeah, you like you like all this metal stuff, but do you ever hear this? And he played this, and I was like, we were just like, holy shit, what the hell is that, And I had some friends, and they were into, we were all into Rat and that type of stuff, but I had friends that were also Poison fans and Bon Jovi fans and that type of stuff. So when this hit, we had no idea what we were hearing. I was blown away, and we had a station. It was a college radio station back there in Utah, and it was on, I don't remember the call letters, but it was on 88.1 FM. And on Saturday nights, they would play this type of stuff, Metallica and Slayer and so on. So we were getting that from that college independent type radio. So bands, Metallica and Slayer and, of course, the greatest thrash band of all time, Megadeth. And the first time I was really introduced to Megadeth was the video for Peace Sells. and other stuff like Testament and Overkill and, Overkill, Testament, these types of records and that type of music that I was being influenced by at that point in time. So that takes me between like starting as a child all the way up to about the 9th grade or so. And that's what kind of built my musical taste at the time. Of course, through high school, it's still, I start getting things like we get LA Guns and Guns N' Roses and Cinderella and Skid Row, and that stuff starts to happen throughout that time frame between like 84 and 87 when I graduated from high school. And I'm into all of that stuff. And of course, thrash is blowing up. Metallica is becoming mainstream. Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer, everybody knows who these bands are. Like I said, when we first heard them, they were underground. They were like literally underground. You go and like, okay, I want this, and the guy at the record store would be like, oh, I don't have that. We don't usually get that in or whatever. I got my first Slayer tape by answering an ad in the back of a Circus magazine. It just had the logo. It said Slayer with the pentagram on there. Send $5 in self-addressed stamped envelope too, blah, blah, blah. Sent $5 cash. A month later, Hell Awaits shows up on cassette at my front door. That's how I got my first Slayer album. So that's the type of stuff that was going on back then. And then through high school, all that becomes more mainstream. My music kind of spreads out just a little bit more. I met a few punks, so I'm hearing some punk music and stuff like that. And of course, then I graduated high school, and the things go on from there. Things have always moved on. You get grunge and nu metal and groove metal and punk, 90s pop punk, and it just continues on. But what really built my musical taste and how I buy music is what I just showed you today and what I've been talking about today. So that's pretty much all I've got for today. I know I showed a whole lot and I wasn't really talking about records and pressings and all that stuff, but just to kind of let you know kind of where this comes from, how we're all kind of designed a little bit as our parents, children, and what we have, and how that kind of, depending on your era also. Of course, I had Top 40 radio, and I had music videos, and we had MTV, which MTV was very interesting. They weren't genre specific like the radio is. You can listen to a rock station, you listen to a country station, you listen to this. MTV played all kinds of stuff all the time. You could see a video for Rat, followed by Michael Jackson, followed by Madonna, followed by, Poison, followed by Motley Crue, followed by, Madness, and on, and the Culture Club video, and then thrash starts coming in, and we're getting Megadeth, and, Megadeth videos were kind of first, and there was videos Overkill off the Taking Over album and things like that. So that kind of morphed all of us who were my age, who came of age in that time frame when MTV was huge, that we were getting everything, all the different styles of music, all the different bands. You're getting Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel and Genesis, and you're getting, late 80s, getting the Stones and some, all this type of stuff. So it's all being morphed together, and you don't realize how much some of that other music that you weren't paying attention to at the time is molding your musical taste. So that's kind of where I go from there, and that will take me up probably through high school, that style of music, listening to 80s metal, listening to thrash, and, then when the 90s happen, of course, everything changes, and we get groove metal, and we get nu metal, and we get grunge, and all that starts to happen, but that's later. I wouldn't be listening to nu metal if I didn't listen to metal, and grunge probably wouldn't have happened. It was a reaction to the 80s Sunset Strip debauchery type of metal, and listening to thrash and everything else. And that's what we were doing, and there were our friends and our girls and everything else, and they loved Bon Jovi, and they loved Cinderella, and which I love Cinderella, don't get me wrong. But they loved White Lion and all these, pretty type things. And, of course, Motley Crue and those bands also morphed their look as the years went on. Stick with the darker themes. I geared myself more towards thrash music at that point in time. In the later years, junior, senior, and high school and stuff, it was more about thrash than about the glam metal scene because I didn't have the look. I didn't have the hair like that. I didn't do my hair like that. My hair was long. It was straight. It was black, dark brown, whatever. And, you know, we were thrashers. I had Megadeth jackets and we wore Metallica shirts. We had our patches and spikes and fingerless gloves and that whole look. I wasn't the guy with the big hair and the bandanas and all that stuff. So I kind of geared more towards the heavier music as time went on. So, and I still kind of gear towards heavier music. So anyway, thanks for sitting through this 25 minutes. Like I said, if you're still with me here, I'll put a link down to Mark for Twanger's Turntable for his video that inspired this because I saw his first. And then I went back and I watched Keith's video, Back in the Groove, who inspired Mark to do his video. So if you guys, you know, like I said, Mark called this thread or not. I don't know. I'll probably call it the same thing. And then you guys can make a decision. Is this a thread or not? But I thought it was kind of an interesting idea, so I just thought I'd share. Anyway, that's pretty much it for me for tonight. Maybe I have another idea. I might put out 2 videos today. All right. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you all later.